right. Hello, and welcome, everybody. I'm so excited for our interview today with Miss Lorine Hoffer. And before we get into that, welcome to the Body Mind Living podcast. This is the place where we want to share and demonstrate ways to live life connected. And today's interview is somebody that I am personally so excited for this conversation because Lorine Hoffer, otherwise known as Lori, so you'll hear me call her Lori, you specialize in working with parents and children and helping them. Hold on a second. There we go. You specialize in helping parents and children cultivate this connective communication. So we're going to be talking about that today. If you are joining us live, this is being streamed live. Please, as always, say hello. Let us know you can hear us, that the sound is coming through by pressing that like button. That always helps us. And just let us know that you're joining us here live. Say hello in the comments. So today we have Lorine Hoffer. Lorine is a certified BodyMind Coach. She is a big change facilitator, also a licensed massage therapist, and a childhood fascination with the body-mind connection led Lorine to a lifelong professional focus on helping clients ditch the stress patterns and the aches and pains, keeping them stuck. Her skills flow from massage to education to psychology to entrepreneurship. This mighty arsenal uniquely qualifies her to help clients reconnect with themselves, parents and kids, so they wake up feeling rested, confident, empowered, and ready to take on the day. Lorine loves to laugh. She loves to laugh. Curse. My kind of gal. Oh my goodness, I chose the wrong mug this morning. I should have chose the one that says I curse a lot.
You could have both bought our cursing mugs.
We'll have to be right back, folks. I'm just kidding. She loves to explore nature, hang out with her insightful daughter. I 1,000% agree with that. And get into living the good stuff and connected conversations. And she loves to notice just the beauty in every day. Described as having both fierce compassion and fierce independence, she'll hold space for you and hold you accountable to the big changes you are ready to claim. So, hello. We have quite a few people joining us here. Hi, welcome. Hello. Lori, so I'm so fascinated as to, I love, like, one of the things I love is seeing how, you came into BodyMind coaching and you took this and combined it with just this lifelong passion that you have specifically around empowering parents and the effective communication with kids. And by the way, if any of you haven't watched this already, in our most recent issue of BodyMind Living magazine, there is a conversation with Lori and her daughter, and it's amazing. You gotta listen to it. But I'm curious, where did this all start? Like, what was it that got you interested in this topic?
In the connected communication with kids?
Yeah.
Honestly, Laura, it really came from just my own experiences growing up as a kid. It was clear to me as I moved into, adulthood, how much of that was missing and how, like, the connection, how important even. I'm gonna go back for 1 second, because to me, connected communication, right, like, goes way beyond like parent, caregiver, child relationship. Like it's like the foundation and building block of any relationship we have, including with ourselves. And so my own connected communication with myself was really lacking growing up. So it's something that I made the conscious decision to seek out. And then my background, I've always loved kids. I started working in summer school programs when I was like 14. I started babysitting when I was 10. I have always loved being with kids and connecting with them and really helping them learn that they get to and have the permission to connect to themselves and not just live like basically guided by the expectations of particularly adults or society around them.
There is so much to unpack just in what you said right there. Well, and one thing that popped up as you were talking is, this is something that I learned in the coaching world, is that we tend to create like communication expectations in relationships early on in the relationship, right? So, parents and children, like, you learn how to communicate, when their child is something. My dog just hit something. You learn how to communicate. And I'm thinking of a personal experience where, like, my mom and I for years talked to each other like, I'm 4 years old and she's, a new parent. And even in my 20s and 30s, we still communicated like that. And how we default to these styles. My husband is actually going to hang out with some of his college buddies this weekend. And I was actually just telling him this. It's like, I watch him, like, when they get together, they start acting like they're in college again, even though they're like grown-ass men.
It's those neural pathways.
Yes, it is those neural pathways. But what I found so interesting in what you said is, like, we also do this to ourselves.
Absolutely. Just like, it's the same, right? It's the neural pathways. It's those same patterns over and over. And we also do it generationally, right? Like, our parents learned communication from their parents, and their parents learned it, whatever it looks like, from their parents, right? And so unless we, for whatever reason, unless something sparks in us to, like, really make a conscious and intentional change around it, these same patterns continue, which is why you see, like, through generations, you see the same things, often issues, but also successes, can sort of come up. But I feel like in general, you end up seeing it a lot more in issues, right? Like, I know people whose entire family communicate, and I use air quotes because to me, this isn't, like, it of course is legitimate communication, but it's not how I choose to communicate, through arguing. Mm-hmm. And that to me is incredibly stressful, but, and as an observer, to me, it's not effective because they're so busy and invested in, like, the process of arguing and being right. Nobody's hearing each other. There's not really any, like, deep communication happening within that. Mm-hmm. And, like, to me, that's really hard to see, because communication to me, like, it's just the, it's the basis of any relationship. And when we're lacking in sort of healthy, connected communication skills, our relationships with ourselves and with others really just end up sort of suffering and lacking a lot of the time. I mean, how often do you see with marriages or, again, like, parent-child relationships, or even caregiver, whoever a caregiver is, we say parent, but it's whatever the caregiver is, right? You just see these relationships basically falling apart, because particularly if they're both stuck, like, we'll take a couple, right? Two humans in a intimate relationship. If they're both only communicating from a place that is familiar to them, as opposed to really communicating with each other and figuring out, excuse me, what that looks like, then neither of them is actually feeling seen or heard or honored or respected. And that does not lead to healthy long-term relationships.
Well, yes. And I'm curious, because I 1,000% agree with you. And I hear this, you saw this passion early on. You saw this, I sense you saw this in yourself and your relationships. And I'm curious, how did the body-mind piece come in? You're a massage therapist. So how you're seeing this communication thing happen. You become a massage therapist. You're curious about this body-mind. Like, tell me how all of those pieces start to work together, specifically within this idea of communication.
The body-mind piece for me is really interesting, because by the time I found your BodyMind coaching certification program, I had for years been saying, I think an amazing model would be something that combines, like, massage with conversation, whether it be therapy or something else. And honestly, I just didn't feel like creating it. Like, I fully own that, and I'm totally cool with that, right? Like, it just felt like this needs to exist and I would like to do it, but I don't have the, there's lots of things going on in life and it wasn't a priority. So finding the program, I was like, oh my God, this is what I've been saying for years. And I also realized, like, that's how I've lived my entire life without ever having a name to it, right? With this sort of just full body relationship and awareness of all aspects of my body. And to me, really, that's what body mind living is. It's this, it's really understanding the language and messages of the body, right? Learning them and understanding them so that you can live in the way that actually feels good to you. Like, to me, that's really what it is. And so I find in our culture in general, we tend to be taught not to listen to our body. Especially as kids, we tend to like bang it out of them, right? Like, our kid is like, hey, I'm hungry. And, as a parent, we're like, you just ate, so you're not hungry. So we've immediately shut down this idea that the child, has some understanding of their body. Or, you need to put on a sweater because I'm cold. But I'm not cold, but I'm cold, so you have to put on a sweater. So from a very early age, we tend to give these messages to kids that as adults, we're in charge, right? It's like this control versus collaboration, or sometimes I refer to it as like dictator versus collaborator. And for me, a huge piece of kind of the parenting puzzle is approaching it from this angle of collaborator. And that doesn't mean that any one person always gets everything they want, right? That's not what collaboration is anyway, right? It's collaboration and compromise. But it does mean that sort of inviting the conversation around it. So the body mind part it's just always been a piece of me. Mm-hmm. So it's not like so it just made perfect sense to me to bring that into my parenting. And in addition, my degree is in psychology and special education. Like I said, I've always been fascinated by kids. I'm fascinated by humans in general and sort of how they work and interact with the world. So it was just kind of this beautiful confluence of everything coming together.
Yeah, one thing that I'm hearing underneath this is, like, with that body mind piece and the communication, like, there's this cycle of parents need to control, not collaborate. So they send these messages to kids that create this disconnection within themselves, that they're not able to know their own body and able to ask for what they need and regulate and have that conversation. So that grows into an adult that when stress, pain, and all that stuff shows up, failure to listen, and then parenting. And so like the cycle continues. So there's something underneath this of like this connective communication really starts within yourself.
100%. I am such a firm believer, and that's one of the things I really tell people, like, I even have a course that's designed for like parents and kids. That's the general idea. But the fact is, it even says in the description, like, you can do this with you, because it's that self-connection that is really the basis for any other connection to any other being, right? Like, when we feel completely disconnected to ourselves, it's really hard to connect with anyone else. And there tends to be this searching for, like, we tend to search out other people, like trying to fill this void of self-connection. And something may fill it for a little bit, but it's not lasting, right? It's like, until we sort of take the time and intention and really give ourselves permission to get to know ourselves and come into ourselves and connect with ourselves, every other relationship that we have, struggles, because I really feel like that's what the body, that's what the mind, that is what we are designed to do, connect to self so we can connect to others. And when that's missing, we're kind of out of luck.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, this is why, I love this. And I hear you're talking really about like the body mind method and how that conversation really guides people back to themselves, allows them to like have those tools. And so step one in this connective communication is learning how to listen to yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And the language of your body. Like I've always talked about the language of our body. You know, our body is always giving us messages.
Mm-hmm.
All the time. But nobody ever, for most of us, right? Nobody ever gives us the textbook to learn the language, right?
Amen. Yeah.
Nobody gives us permission. Nobody gives us permission to listen to us because we tend to, right, like older generations, you know, adults. Kids are disruptive. Having a kid in your life is disruptive to what you have known, right? To your normal. It's very disruptive. It's just this whole new, you know, change. And like that shit is hard and scary, right? And so our immediate reaction is to try to control it so that it seems familiar. And when we do that, we're trying to also like control the kids so that they grow up into who we want them to be versus who they are, right? And it's not malicious. It's not, you know, often it's not conscious, but this is part of like the human pattern in existence. So if we aren't really stepping back and being intentional with ourselves and asking ourselves about this, we're going to continue with those same patterns.
Yes. And I'm sitting here, so this is why I'm excited for this conversation. I'm currently raising a toddler, and you know, that idea of we need to keep him safe. We need to teach him some boundaries, like don't run into the street. And also, like you're talking about, I don't want to teach him out of knowing himself. So I know we have a lot of parents who are listening today. I got a lot of messages from people who are like, I can't wait for this interview. Can you share a little bit for the parents who are listening? I mean, God, I can tell you stories of like, again, later in life, but can you share a little bit about what are some ways for the parents who are listening to start to bring in this connective communication? What are some simple things that they can start to do to instead of control, collaborate?
I feel like one of the most important pieces of that is there can be this sense of, oh my God, it's too late, right? Because so often when we hear parenting, we think of it, you know, and it does start at birth, right? Like connected communication starts at birth. And that doesn't mean that if your child is now, you know, 15, you can't start. Like you can always start to create the change, you know?
And I think it would be so impactful for a 15-year-old to see, you know, a caregiver say, hey, like not even have to tell them, but to just notice that they're changing, like, which gives them permission that they can change or make different choices later in life too.
And
so even if it's
power, if as a 15-year-old, your caregiver came to you and said like, hey, you know what? I think I've really fucked some of this up. You know, like I'm going to make some changes and they're probably going to be uncomfortable for both of us, but this is why, you know. And yes, you may get some eye rolls because 15, and that's totally cool. That's part of the individuation process, right? Like literally we're designed to do some of these, but you are 100% then modeling for your child, right? That like you get to make mistakes, you get to own up for them, and then you get to create change. Like how many of us were actually ever given those gifts? And to me, those are total gifts, right? Like that kind of awareness is a gift.
It is. It's like everybody else is allowed to do that. But for me, I have to be perfect, get this right. And if I admit that stuff, like, something's wrong with me. But instead, you're actually breaking the cycle and showing your child like, hey, they can do this too. Okay. So one starts with yourself, and two, it's never too late.
Never too late.
Yeah. Okay, so then what would be next? What's a simple skill maybe that somebody could start to implement? And I mean, I can sit here and talk about James all day because I'm like, can I share a story?
Absolutely. I was going to say, why don't you talk about James? Like, let's talk about it.
Well, I mean, well, yes, and this is something that I do with him, and then also. I was actually started, I used to do massage at Children's Hospital in the pain clinic. And I was actually in-house in the hospital. So I would see, kids that were a couple months old, up to, we had cystic fibrosis patients who were in their 40s. So not necessarily kids. But one of the things that I always did, especially for the little babies, is that I would always say, like, is it okay for me to pick you up? Is it okay for me to hold you? Is it okay? Like I would literally, even though, they're nonverbal at this point, I would like literally just kind of hold them and be like, is it okay for me to massage you? Is it okay for me to touch you? And I would wait for their little bodies. Like, you can tell when somebody like lets you in, right? So the same is true with James. I'm very like asking that permission. And this is also something in coaching. It's like, you want to ask for consent, right? Like, especially initially, like, I think in any therapeutic relationship, in any relationship, let's be honest, like, you have to ask for consent, and you have to ask for consent for, multiple times. Like, at this point, he's 20 months old now, like, you can feel the consent, but even still, I'm just always like, hey, I'm going to do this now. Like, I'm always telling him what's going on and asking that permission. So that's one thing I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Consent is, as you know, one of my all-time favorite things. Anybody who's ever followed me on any sort of social media knows that I talk about consent a lot. And it does. Consent starts from the moment a child is born, right? Just like you said, and does that mean that when your child has, a dirty diaper and, they're sort of struggling with, and so there's this nuance that can happen, particularly when kids are really little, around consent and really health, right? Like,
right. Yeah. So how do you not? Because like the other thing that comes up is like, he also loves to take off and start running, so it's like, I need to stop him, so it's not like, is it okay that I stop you? Like, so how do you navigate that line,
I feel like, with little kids, it's different. Because we do it's literally our job and responsibility to keep them from dying.
Yes.
Right?
Very much so. Yes.
To keep them from dying, to keep them healthy, to give them these building blocks. And so there's not one right or wrong answer. It's really individual, because the other thing is, there's no one way that's going to work for, for every child. I mean, even within a family, people will have, 2 kids and they are completely different beings, and you basically have completely different ways of approaching them. And so that's why, to me, it's all about like having these sort of building blocks and then feeling into it. And you know what? It's going to be messy, and you're going to mess up, right? You're going to mess up. You're going to have troubles. You're going to be like, oh man, I really, I really screwed that one up. Like, and that's a piece of it. That's a piece of being human.
Do you say to the child, like, hey,
I 100%, yes. And I actually feel like that is a huge and really important tool as well, because it helps kids to realize, again, like, from the time that they're born, that adults aren't like these magical beings that just know everything, right? Like, they're human too. I have told my daughter, she's 14 now, I have told her since the day she was born, like, oh my gosh, I messed up, long before I had any sort of confirmation that she could understand my words. But it just became normal, right? I also, from the time she was born, I have always said, please and thank you to her, right? Like, a baby who can't speak, they hand you a toy, please and thank you, because all of these things build, whether we don't know how much babies are holding on to. So I tend to take the approach that they're holding on to everything. So every interaction we have with them, right, has some kind of impact. I feel like there was another question and now I've gone off on a tangent.
I forget anyway, so it's all good. Well, I'm also curious. So what are some ways that, like, how do you support a child in knowing and listening to their own body? Because you're right. Like, I'm aware that James isn't going to be able to verbally express his emotions until he's like 20, so emotions can feel big. And the way we're physiologically wired is we don't have the language. Like the way we feel emotions, there is no language associated in our brain, which is why even grown ass adults can't like express how they're feeling. But like, how do you support him? Because I know he's 20 months and, I think about when he's 5 and he has big emotions, but not the words or the skill set to express that. How do you support a child in that connection?
So funny. I always refer to my daughter as having vivid emotions. I always have.
Vivid. Oh, I love that word.
Vivid emotions. They've always been very big, very full, right? She's a highly sensitive person. So the world is like big and vivid. It's a really interesting way to live. How do you support it? Do you have a specific example?
Oh goodness. I think for me, it's like, I'm really intentional of like, I don't want to label everything for him. I want to give him, like, let him have his experience.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah.
Like, even this isn't even emotions. Like, I usually just let him kind of play and explore and touch things. Like, I'm not always like, I'm not always like bracelet, pen, like, not that I would give him a pen to play with. Like, this might not be the best toy for a child, but like, I'll just kind of let him like have his experience of it. Goodness, what is an example? Yeah, I can see the waves of excitement and then it gets very vivid. It gets very big. He doesn't talk. He yells. Like, everything is very big. And I like, because we don't have the words yet. So, again, it's like, I don't want to make that wrong. And sometimes it's like, can we be quiet?
Well, and you know what? But here's the thing. You get to have, right? Like, you get to express your wants and needs in that as well. Mm-hmm. Right? Before I got into massage, I worked in the school system and I worked with 5, 6, and 7-year-olds. And that is very loud, right? Like, K1, 2 classrooms are very loud, which makes perfect sense, right? It's very active. And so they're loud. And we had particularly, school hallways, how they can be like echo chambers, right? And so I remember, right, like I literally taught the kids. I was like, y'all, like, I was basically like, you got to bring the volume down. Like, I'm getting a headache, right? And like, just claim it, right? Like, name it and claim it. Can you please bring the volume down? I'm getting a headache. And I know when I get a headache, I'm not my best self and best teacher for you. Right? So there's like that sort of, and does that always mean that things happen? No, but it's also giving the language around someone else's experience. To me, this is part of how you develop like the empathy and compassion piece.
Say more about that. How do you do that?
Well, just even like that, like literally I've told them, this is my experience, right? Or this is the action. This is very loud. This is what's happening to me. I'm getting a headache. This is the effect it will have on me and how it will affect you too, right?
I love how you did that and you didn't make it like you're being loud and like it was like, you talk more about the facts more than putting it on them, right?
Yeah, I am a big believer in, I'm trying to think of what the word would be for it, the sort of ownership piece and not blaming, right?
Mm-hmm.
So not, or I'll give you an example, because something that we hear a lot in the world is, you made me sad, right? Right? People are
Wow.
like, you made me sad, just in general from people, right? Like, you made me so angry. I don't have that power. I don't actually have that power to make, right? Like, we get to own our own reactions. So it's like, it's that sort of like, I feel sad because kind of stuff, which is very different than you made. So there's that ownership piece. And I had another thought.
So,
you know how it is, Laura, when they run through your brain.
I totally get that. So instead of being like, Lori, you made me sad, say, Lori, I'm feeling sad. So I'm owning my emotions. I'm feeling sad because this situation led me to blah, blah, blah. Or your actions had this effect on me, or
sometimes it's just like, wow, I feel sad, right? Like, we're so quick to blame, to not take ownership in general. And we tend to do this with kids too, right? I mean, you hear, if I was to say to my daughter, you gave me a headache because you were too loud, I have just destroyed any like sort of connected communication involved in that, right?
Yeah.
Because I've just told her that she's the problem. She's not the problem. My body is the problem in that. It's not even a problem. It just is, right? Like, it doesn't even have to be good and bad. It simply is. One of the things that she and I talk about a lot too are, right, you make a comment, I'll make a comment about something, and I can see her like, and start immediately to take it as criticism. And one of the things that's observation, not criticism. And it has not been presented in the form of criticism, right? It's like, this is something I've observed, and this is the pattern that I've seen come out of it. There's not this like sense of judgment and blame. And does that make sense? It's really,
it totally makes sense.
Just this, it's truly about observation and sharing that. And we can do that with kids of any age. And that's how they sort of learn to navigate the world, including themselves, right? And start to observe for themselves, right? Observe in their self, right? I mean, we can ask kids, like, how's that feel in your body when they have the language, or even when they don't? I mean, these are things, there's no reason we can't begin using all of these tools when kids are really little, or when they're 15, or here's the fact, every one of us is somebody's kid. So that's why literally I'm like talking with your kids. And my daughter and I just had a conversation about this, and she's like, I don't know about the word kids, Mom, right? And I said, well, tell me more about that, which is part of how we interact. She will bring something and I'm like, tell me more. Like, I love different perspectives. I want her
curiosity.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
I want her perspective because she is living the world in a different way than I am. And so I'm like, well, tell me more about that. She said, well, I'm not sure how many like teenagers would like the word kids. And I was like, oh, well, is this something you've talked about with your friends? Well, no, not really. I said, well, are you curious about why I chose kids? Well, yeah. I said, well, here's the thing. I feel like the word like child or children very often in society has ages associated with it, right? Like you're a child until you're, 10, and then you're a preteen tween, and then you're a teen, and then you're a young adult. She's like, yeah, and then she added some, I said, so child doesn't really feel good to me. I said, what I love about kids is I feel like it really incorporates everybody, because you have terms out there like, we're all kids at heart. Like I'm Grammy's kid, you're my kid, like
I'm still my parents' kid, like,
right?
And I'm 41. Yeah. So I get that.
Oh, yeah. No, I said, is there another word you feel like would, resonates more for you?
One thing, so can I share an observation? So this is what's sort of shown up for me as you're talking, and I'm curious if anybody else feels this as you're listening. So again, in Body Mind, one of the things we talk about is, we talk about energy, and words have energy, right? A big reason why I believe that every practitioner needs to understand effective communication is because, like, even in an intake conversation, you don't realize how, like, the little thing that you shared about like how we tend to, like, when it comes to, like, I'm feeling sad, like I am sad, that energy is like you take that on, and instead of I'm feeling sad, right, there's a difference, or I'm experiencing sadness. And how, so if somebody comes in, I'm stressed versus I'm experiencing stress, like those two things are very different sentences. And one of the things that I'm going to carry forward from this, and I'm curious if anybody else, maybe we could try this on, or if you have any insights, Lori, I almost want to, like, watch be aware of the energy of my words and how they show up in James, because this is something, like, in a coaching conversation, I'll watch people and I'm listening for their words, but more than that, I'm listening for how the energy of those words show up in their body. Like, you can watch a mom talk about her kids, right? Or worry about, my kid's going off to college this fall, like, oh my God, COVID. Like, I think all of us were up here,
a lot of ear hugging.
A lot of ear hugging. Yeah. So we talk about the energy of words, and we talk about, like, these little subtle shifts. Like, I really hope as you're listening to this, the words matter. And especially, I think it's so habitual in our culture, how our emotions become who we are, instead of energy that is there to inform us. And it's a subtle thing that Lori is doing here. And that, like, so one, you're doing this for yourself. And then in relationship with your daughter, you're almost like, I almost feel like, this is more of, like, if anybody else feels this, instead of it becoming this conversation of, like, I'm angry, I'm pissed off, rawr, like, you've become two whole beings, and there's this, like, lane of energy in the middle. And you're able to talk about the energy in the middle and, like, be curious to how your perspective of how you see it, and you're curious to her perspective of how she sees it. And it's not like the subtle shift of how you're talking, you've created two whole beings that get to be connected and intertwined. And is this making any sense whatsoever? Because this is the visual experience that I'm having.
I totally hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Like, just shifting, like, so what I'm trying to say is I really want to be intentional of the words. And even though he's 20 months, we have a handful of words that we're saying, I can still, like, see and watch how his little body responds to those words and those sentences.
Yeah. What that reminds me a little of? Go ahead.
No, go. I'm done.
No, you were going to say something. Say it.
I just, again, like, this is, when we talk about learning how to listen to the body, and I hear, every therapist practitioner that comes to us is a lot like Lori, like, they see this thing happening, right? You see this. We forget that the words that we use, literally, like, if you want people to learn the language of their body, you have to help understand how words matter, right?
Mm-hmm. I love words. Oh my God.
Oh,
like,
yes.
I will sit and I'm like, what's the word? Like, words to me are, my gosh, I'm trying to think, what did one of my friends said something to me once. I wish it would pop into my brain right now. It was basically like that. I use words like, man, I can't remember it right now. But yeah, I love words. I love finding the right word, right? And by right, I mean, for me, right, the right word is the one that feels good.
Yes, it's like the aligned one, the one that goes
like the word that's like, that's the word, right?
Yes.
I fucking love them. I love words. I love language. And as you were talking about talking with James and sort of the energy of words and stuff, one of the things that pops into my mind is the character of Groot. Right?
From the galaxy?
Yes. Because all Groot says is, I am Groot, over and over. But it's all in the tone. It's all in the energy about what Groot means. Groot is all about the energy of those words. It's the same thing. I am Groot. I am Groot. Right? It doesn't matter. It's about the energy that comes from it, that they, that's what they're getting off of what
and how they intuitively, very much. Well, yeah, and so this is a little thing that this, like, again, words matter. So James is very much learning his boundaries of how far he can go from us. And so we were at the zoo. We live close to the zoo. We were there walking around, and he made friends with this little group of boys. And this mom was walking around with 4 boys, and they're a little bit older than him, and they started running and they're playing, and they got a little bit further away, and she goes, red light, and they stopped dead in their tracks. And I was like, that is genius. Because I realize as he is learning, like this, just how a word changes everything. He was running away and we're saying no, right? And how that word can be interpreted like, you're wrong, you're bad, like, no, right? There's so much energy in that. And so we've started to play around with, like, when he's kind of approaching a boundary, if he goes to touch we were grilling last night. If he goes to touch the grill, if he starts to go a little far, we're saying red light. And it's that in itself. And he's learning, like he'll stop and, kind of look back to us. And that's just a way that we've started to shift some of the words that we use around here.
Do you know what's amazing about that, Laura?
Did I do something right?
He's of course you did. Yeah. He is going to learn that, and he will get to use it with you. And then you will get to show him how you respect it and his consent as well. And that will build up for him this understanding that will last him a lifetime in regards to consent, and that his consent matters both directions, right? Giving and receiving, and moving into adulthood and, other types of relationships. That shit is super important. Like, this is how it starts. It starts with things like red light, him respecting it, and then you respecting it when he decides to trust it, try it out on you as well.
So can I share a story? And you've probably heard this before, but I kind of want to circle back as we start to wrap this up to that comment of it's never too late. Am I allowed to share a story?
You are always allowed to share a story.
Okay.
I love a story.
So when I was, how old was I when I got engaged? I was 29 when I got engaged. That was a long time ago. Sheesh. And we lived in South Carolina at the time, and my parents were in Ohio, and the wedding was going to be in Ohio. So my mom was like helping out with the wedding. And all of our communication stuff kind of came to a head. Growing up, my mom and I were kind of the ones that would like butt heads. And, I was probably a vivid child as well. And I would get in trouble with my mom, and then my dad would come and talk to me. Like, that was kind of let me say it this way. That is my recollection of it.
And that's all we have. I feel like
that might not be 100% true.
That we all live from our own experience and perspective. And that's a really important thing to remember in any communication with another person, is that you're meeting them based on their experience and perspective of it. You could put 100 people in a room and ask them what happened in the room, and they would all have a different story because they're all living it from their perspective. So when we can start to view the world with that understanding, it really opens up like this ability for compassion and empathy and understanding of other people.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So my recollection, because my parents might tell you something different of their recollection. And so my mom and I always had this like tension, right? So, and it came to a head when they came down to visit us and we were going to go through and like plan all the wedding stuff and whatever. So before this happens, I was really stressed out. I was really frustrated. I had a conversation with my coach who told me we tend to create the guidelines of communication early on in the relationship. And so it sounds like, your experience of this is that your mom is talking to you like you're 4 years old and you don't know what you're doing. And I was definitely reacting like I was a 4-year-old, like, no, I'm going to do it my way, like testing the boundaries. And that was just this like where we were kind of locked in. So she comes down, and we're sitting there, we're starting to argue, and I share that with her. Mm-hmm. And I said, I feel like you're talking to me like I'm 4 years old and you don't trust me. You don't trust me to make my own decisions. Right? I'm crying. And this is the kicker. And this honestly changed my life. Mm-hmm. Right? She said, Laura, ever since you were a child, you had this ability to take risks and like follow your dreams and like trust your intuition. Like you've always had this. And like, she's like, one that made me nervous. And I don't think this was the exact word, but what I recall was, and part of me was jealous of that. Mm-hmm. Like part of me, like I admired that. Maybe that's more of a healthy word. Like I admired you in that. And like, also like, so it was just so fascinating to hear how she viewed one of my strengths, that I always thought that she thought it was like a bad thing. But the truth was it was a quality in me that she admired, mm-hmm. but didn't know how to put it within her frame of reference.
Yeah. Didn't know what to do with it.
Didn't know what to do with it. So at that, yeah. So in that moment, I said like, I feel free to give me your thoughts and insights and your opinions. And I'm asking you to trust the decisions that I make, because I know what I want and I know myself. And I just need to know that you're on board with me. Right. And like that changed everything.
Versus permission.
Yeah, totally. Yes. So right. So again, I was, in my upper 20s, and that moment, like my mom and I communicate really well. She is very good at telling me what she thinks about stuff. And I am very good about saying, thank you. And I'm going to make my own decision. But like, I just, I think about how my hope is for myself and for everybody listening, no matter what age your kids are, like start to think about listening to yourself, right, Lori? Like
100%.
Being present within yourself, consent, asking for that consent, and then starting to see like the energy of the words. And, my hope is that James and I, obviously I trust that I'm going to fuck shit up somehow with him, and he'll like, this sounds really weird. I trust that I'm going to mess up my child the way that is going to help his growth later on.
I love it.
That's probably going to turn into a quote card that I might regret later, because I'm giving myself permission not to be the perfect parent. And
how light does that feel?
That feels great.
No perfect parent, right? Like that's such a big piece of it. There's not a one of us who isn't going to mess up, multiple things in our life. Like we were talking about it the other day, Laura, when we were on that call, right? Like that is normalizing being human.
Yes.
That is normalizing being human. We're going to mess up. Some things are going to be awesome and some things are going to suck. Some things are going to seem awesome and then they're going to, plot twist and suck. Some things are just going to be there and be, like, okay, like whatever. And all of that is okay. Like all of that is a part of the human experience. And so when we make that intentional choice to really guide our kids and teach them about, these are literal realities of the human experience, right? So when we open sort of the availability of that to our kids, at whatever age, from a very young age, whatever age we choose to, it's super freeing. It's super freeing to just normalize being human.
I love that. I love that. Like, if all we do as parents is normalize being human, I think we've done a good job.
Yeah, our job, to me, parenting is it's literally just being a guide, and all we can do is our best in the moment, whatever that is in the moment, right? Every moment is different. I think when my daughter was I think it was her second grade classroom, there was a a thing on the wall that said, do your best, always do your best, or whatever. And she and I talked about it, and I was like, I really like this. And what about if it was always do your best, always do your personal best in the moment? Because the fact is, every moment is different, right? And there are some mornings where, where James wakes you up at 2 and then 4, and your personal best is just to drag your butt out of bed at 6 to, take the dogs for a walk or whatever. You know what I mean? And there are some mornings where there's some days where our personal best is to sit on the couch and just watch TV. And there's some mornings where our personal best is to go out and do a 100-mile bike ride. It's not, there's not one best. Everything in life is on these continuums. And when we allow ourselves to really explore that continuum and just the support, that self-support, right? Self-permission and self-support to be where we are in the moment. We talk a lot about meeting people where they are, and not where we want them to be. We talk about it in coaching. It's something that, I know we've talked about in the program. It's something I talk about. The fact is, we get to do that with ourselves too. You get to meet yourself where you are and not where you want to be, and then decide sort of what it looks like from there. And sometimes that's sleeping the day away, and sometimes that's, reorganizing your pantry, whatever is on your, sometimes it's building into, whatever it is, but it gets to be in the moment. I feel like that in the moment piece is such an important aspect that is often kind of missing from that conversation.
Yes. And there's such a level of compassion of that. I also loved how you changed it from do your best, because I'm like, who's telling me what the best is? Right? There's a whole standard that we could probably go down there. And to me, that's where you're going to get into the patriarchy. What is best? And who decides that?
Best are we talking about?
Exactly. So personal best is oh, okay, I get to take ownership of this. And then in the moment is the recognition that life is always moving. And to me, it brings in a level of compassion of and presence, right?
Yeah.
So you're actually more in that. I freaking love that.
Personal best also invites us back into our body. It invites us to know ourselves, right? It literally invites us to live in this sort of body-mind way of awareness and, checking in with self. Personal best, let me check in with me. What's my personal best? What does that look like and feel like today?
Yeah. I want to sit here and talk forever. And also, I know that we're coming up on our time here today. So number one, I'm just going to say two things. One, if you have not gone and listened to the interview that Lori and her amazing daughter, Alana, conversation, I should say, not interview, in the most recent issue of BodyMind Living magazine, go check it out. You can get a free copy at bodymindliving.com. Second thing is you have an amazing course on on communication, on connective communication. I highly encourage people to check that out, especially for the parents out there who are wanting, found that communication is really the key. And if you want your children, if you want your children to really live a connected life where they're present to themselves and their body, it starts with that communication. And Lori is just amazing at that. So, and Lori, can you let people know where they can connect with you and on social media and on the interwebs of sorts?
Absolutely. probably the easiest way to find all of those things is on my website, lorinehoffer.com. It's just like it's written there, but with N-E. Are you putting it in the comments? So lorinehoffer.com. From there, you can find my Instagram, which is also Lorine Hoffer. You can find my Facebook. There's a private group I have on Facebook, which really anyone is welcome to join. I keep it private because that sets up an environment for people to be as vulnerable as they are comfortable with, without it being open to the entire Facebook, Facebook community. But it's just a free private group that you are more than welcome to join. You can always email me, Lorine@lorinehoffer.com.
Look at that. I love the consistency of that.
Make it easy.
Just remember Lorine Hoffer. I feel like we could have a jingle with that. Like, for all your parenting needs, call Lorine Hoffer. I'm just kidding. You're welcome. Laura Wick, jingle maker. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Lori, thank you so much for I'm always amazed, and why I love these conversations is because, we got you hear the thunder come in?
Is that what that was?
That's thunder. So one thing that I love is I love hearing how your unique perspective of, the things that you're passionate about, how you work, those natural things that you're already doing get to come in and live within the world of body mind, and how, like, Laura, you're giving parents the tools to teach this to the kids, which, we talk about the wave, we talk about that impact, and how it just continues to expand because of that. So thank you for your brilliance, and thank you for being a part of the wave and just expanding that through all of your amazing work. So yay. All right. So go check out Lori, get that issue of Body Mind Living. For those of you who are interested in becoming Body Mind coaches, thenewbodymind.com is where it's at. All right. Everybody have a beautiful day. That was a weird wave. Have a beautiful day. We'll see you later.